Hello there, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Cloud-Based Mayhem. We're going to start this one off a little bit differently than we typically do. This podcast is with Guy Anderson, fantastic British pilot who's currently at the Europeans, doing really well over there. Some of you know the name because you know the name, and some of you probably heard about the accident he had here in Sun Valley in 2012. Went in and in a very remote part of the Pioneers, and it took us a couple days to find him. It was a pretty heroic effort to get him out of there, and it was a pretty heroic effort on his part to get through that one. So this episode is a lot about safety and what Guy went through and the success there and his success since and coming back from some pretty major injuries. It's not a downer by any means. This is a really inspiring talk, but I want to talk about and start this one off a little different because of an incident we just had here in Sun Valley a couple days ago. Nate Scales is running the Intermountain wide open. It's been epic. This is the second year he's done it. It's attracting some great pilots to the zone from Utah and Wyoming and Montana and Nevada, and people were just sending. And a couple days ago, we had maybe the best day of the year. Just fantastic. Tons of people showed up. We must have had, 25 people on launch, which is about 200 times what we normally have. And boomer day, fantastic. Got off the hill. I think 12 of us got over Trail Creek, and we were heading towards the Big Lost. We know it's a fantastic day because Nick Grease went on and did, I think, about 300K that day, nearly made it to Bozeman. So it was just really lining up to be a fantastic day. Clouds were lining up. Base was super high. And all of a sudden on the radio, there was this terrifically bad scream. And one of the pilots went in low. Was clearly very hurt, and that rescue effort to get him out of there really, I don't think, could have gone much better. And so I just wanted to talk about some of the things that went down, some of the things we did that really, really worked, so you can be thinking about it in your own flying and your own kit. I'm going to be writing an article about this. In fact, the article might even be out before I get this podcast out, but so there'll be more detail in the article, both for USHPA and on my blog. So keep an eye out for that. But just some of the things that really tipped the scales in terms of the success of getting the victim out of there and getting him to the hospital in pretty record time, I think. We got him out of there in about 3 hours, which sounds like a lot of time, but when you start throwing the helicopters in the mix and the terrain that he went down in and what we had to do to get to him, pretty heroic effort on the part of many people. Some of the things that I just wanted to kind of walk through in regards to the success of that. One was life flight. We used life flight for the helicopter extraction. I think very few of us had life flight membership. It's $60 a year. If you live in the Northwest, that's awfully cheap insurance, instead of paying for a $15,000 helicopter ride. Make sure you've got something. When you travel, make sure you've got something internationally. When you're home, make sure you've got something that works at home. That one is pretty critical. Suddenly you have a bad day and you rack up a whole massive bill. And be careful, things like GEOS, the insurance that we get through Spot or DeLorme, they've got a paragliding exclusion. So I don't believe that covers it. I might be wrong, but make sure you're covered. One of the things that was really critical in the success of it was keeping somebody high. We were in a place that didn't have any cell coverage, but if you were high, you could reach one of the towers. And so Matt Beechner, farmer, was staying up, right around our legal limit, or up around 18,000 feet, and he was calling the shots, which was just a remarkably insane and awesome effort. This Sun Valley in the middle of the day, the pilot went in about 1 p.m., and so the day was smoking and booming, and it was on, and he was up there, managing his glider and calling 911 and managing search and rescue and talking to us on the ground with his radio. Just an unbelievable effort. But I think even more important was just having somebody immediately take the lead. You've got to have a lead in this kind of a situation. Nate Scales just kind of automatically went into that zone and took the lead, and so he was calling the shots with the radio. He made the decision to keep Farmer high. He was putting people in place before we were even on the ground. So make sure you've got somebody that can just keep a level head, be a leader, call those shots. That was really critical. Every single one of us had a DeLorme. Having that two-way texting capability is just totally critical in any kind of situation like this. In my opinion, it's critical every time we fly, but in an emergency like this, you would not believe the amount of two-way texting we were doing. And, at one point, for example, Revis had a really great spot, LZ planned out for the helicopter. So bam, he sends them a message. They've got his Latin long. They've got a position on him. It doesn't mean we don't have to radio it to Farmer. He doesn't have to radio it in from there. It's just done. With a spot, you've got your 4 messages that you have planned out to certain people. If you haven't set up the right people before that certain flight, it's pretty much useless. To me, spot is useless. You've got a tracking device, great, it's better than nothing, but with the DeLorme, you've just got the maps, you've got the two-way texting, you've got the little icon you can press to see where a person is and immediately see their direction and course from you and how far away they are. Just can't stress enough. I mean, if you come and fly here in Sun Valley, I would actually be pretty reticent to fly with you if all you had was a spot. They're just an inferior piece of equipment. We could not have done this rescue with spots. It's just impossible. Number one, the victim couldn't reach his DeLorme, so luckily we had a visual on him. So that's one thing I wanted to stress. Make sure you've got your DeLorme in a place where you can hit the SOS if you go in hard. But we did have a visual on them. A couple other pilots, Bill Belcourt, Revis Gray, and Evan Bouchier, put their gliders. They were able to land very close to the victim, which was really critical to be able to get to him quickly and keep him calm and put him on oxygen and then start taking vitals and relaying all that information to the rest of the team, which we were then able to relay to search and rescue and the helicopter. All that stuff was really critical. O2, keeping the victim, keeping his pulse and blood pressure and everything in check, because we all had O2. That was really helped by having that. Good thing to have in your kit. First aid, Revis had a really solid first aid kit, but we all need to have really solid first aid kits. That's got to have a minimum of some pretty basic stuff, some pretty powerful painkillers, some gauze, some super glue, some steri strips. Make sure you've got a pretty decent first aid kit that you carry with you all the time. This could have gone so much worse. Number one, if this victim had gone in and it was just a typical day here where we've only got maybe 2 or 3 people on launch, it would have been really hard, if not impossible, to get him out of there. So, having people around, having the first aid. Revis had a couple other things that were really critical in his kit. He had like an emergency blanket and he had trekking poles, so he was able to build a big flight sock for when the helicopter came in. Super important. He had pen and paper in his first aid kit to keep the vitals with. Another thing really important that I don't think many other of us had. Enough food and water. It was a really, really hot day. We all had to hike a long ways to get in there. It was, you got to have sunblock, you got to have water, you got to have food, you got to keep calm, and you got to move at a pace where you don't forget anything. You got to have people that are really thinking and working things out. What could we possibly need in there? In this case, before the helicopter got in, we were thinking, okay, we're going to have to carry him out. Really, really, I cannot emphasize how hard that is to do, even when you have a perfect board to carry somebody out on, a backboard or something. But, we took a couple fence posts and we had a bunch of paraglider bags and a bunch of straps, and so we could have fashioned one or built one on the spot if the helicopter couldn't come in there, which was we were actually thinking wasn't going to happen because it was such a big booming day and the terrain was pretty rough. A lot of times helicopters don't like to go into that kind of thing. It was a great extraction, went really well. The victim's going to be totally fine. Surgery, he was pretty banged up, but he's going to be fine. So I guess lastly, it was also a reminder to all of us to just, watch where you're going, watch where you're putting your glider in. I can't even make a call on what happened here at all, but, if you're going into the lee and you're going to be low, God, be careful, and maybe just, if you've already blown the move, maybe call it a day. Maybe just decide, like, hey, this isn't the day for me. I don't need to go in low and scratch in a place that might be dangerous. Save it for another day. Like Nick always says, fly the day, not your desire. So, hopefully that helps. And let's go ahead and get into this talk with Guy Anderson. I think you're going to really enjoy this. Fantastic person and an incredible pilot. He's been at it for, I think, 24 years now. There's a lot to learn from this one. Stick with it. Enjoy my conversation with Guy Anderson.
It's been some time since I have seen your face. Seems we both gained somewhere.
Mr. Anderson, I have always wanted to say that. I'm a huge fan of, well, I'm not a huge fan of Keanu Reeves, but The Matrix. Welcome to the Mayhem. It's really cool to finally be able to do this with you. I know you're in the middle of pretty awesome Europeans. What's happening over there?
Well, it's all kicking off. We are 7 days now into a potentially a total of 9 days, and it's been very, very racy conditions over here. Pretty full bar mashing stuff, and it's great fun.
And I see you're sitting very nicely in 17th place, so you're definitely in striking position. How's it been going for you?
Well, it's all been certainly a bit of an education. We've been given the runaround by Honora in his own fashion. He's really playing the game beautifully, but it's hard in this level to get a break on anybody. They're all so good here that we've had days where 60, 70 pilots are all arriving in goal within 2 minutes of each other. So to really make a jump and make it count is bloody hard.
Yeah, I'll bet.
Very exciting all the way.
Would you compare this to like a Superfinal, or is it the same kind of caliber?
I'd say more or less. I'd say the Superfinal is probably a touch higher because you've got everybody who's on form turning up, and that would include some of the guys from the States and Australia and elsewhere. But you've got all of the main countries from Europe with their best guys, really showing how they fly. So it's a pretty fast and furious level, definitely.
And Honoran is he's just having one this year. My God, that guy is just wow. His big 300 plus FAI triangles in southern France, which is to me a terrifying place to fly. I know that area quite well from the X Alps, and he's just sending it over there. What's he doing differently?
I think Honora is. He's always had the speed. I think now, possibly from chats he's had with Russ, I don't know, but he's showing a real measure of control as well, which I think is it was always going to come. He's got such lovely glider skills, but he's now got an extra level of discipline, I think, to his flying, so he can control gaggles when he wants to, and he can push when he wants to as well. So he's really is becoming the sort of amazing pilot that we all thought he would become. So and he's such a lovely guy at the same time. There's no he's not arrogant in any way. He's just a lovely, really well formed guy. So it's a pleasure flying with him. He's always a real gent in the air. He's not pushy in any way. It's just a nice thing to share the sky with.
Fantastic. Well, hey, I want to talk a lot about comp flying in this kind of interview with you, but I'd love to. There's not a ton of information available about you online, but so I wanted to just give our listeners who aren't really familiar with you and what you're doing a little bit of background. Can you kind of walk back the clock and give us a brief history of Guy Anderson in the air?
Oof. Well, I got started. I was walking up in the Pyrenees. I'm in the wine business, so I was down in Bordeaux and I had a weekend off. So I headed up to the mountains, just to go walking up in the High Pyrenees, and I saw a couple of guys take off, and they thermaled around and then flew all the way down the valley to a bar. And it took me probably 4 hours trekking to get to the same bar. And I just thought that maybe paragliding was a better way of getting around mountains than walking. So I came home, told my wife about this thing I'd seen, and she actually went off and bought me a weekend experience in Wales, and has totally regretted it ever since.
That poor woman. Oh my
Yeah,
goodness.
well, because I knew the very first moment my feet left the ground on a glide down a shitty little hill in Wales that I was totally addicted to this silly thing. And
And what year was that?
that was in 1992.
Oh my goodness.
And and I took it up at the worst possible stage. I had two small girls, one just walking, the other one in a pram, and I would go off at a drop of a hat to Wales every time I could to just to learn and get better, and eventually start thermaling, and I've just been totally hooked on it ever since, really.
And who are your
Not a good thing.
not a good thing for the family, is it? No. Have your
Well,
girls gotten into it at all?
they sort of understand, but it's been a long time, and it's sort of one of those things that Dad does. So anyway, but yeah, it's they've been very good about it over the years.
Have either of your girls gotten into flying?
No, I took them up from quite an early stage. I used to put my helmet on. Whenever I was in charge of the girls, I'd take them off, and we'd go flying off the cliffs on the south coast, and I'd just zip them into my flying suit and put my helmet on their head, and off we go. And but they haven't really. It's not their thing. They quite enjoy coming along on a tandem, but it hasn't gripped them the way it's gripped me. So, but that's great. I mean, everybody does their own thing, and so they should.
And so when did you start getting into comps, and who were your crew back in the day? Was that, Eddie and John Sylvester and those guys, or Russ, or
Yeah, yeah, it was probably pre-Russ when there was Bob Drury around, and yeah, John Sylvester certainly, and Eddie Colfox back in the day. Eddie actually was the guy who taught me. Eddie signed off my club pilot rating in Wales, and yeah, he's a complete hooligan.
Yeah.
And but yeah, and we've shared lots of memorable flights ever since. But yeah, Eddie would have told me to have a go at comp flying, and I turfed up at the Brits in '96, I think.
Okay.
And but in those days, the comp flying was completely different. We used to have to take photos of turn points, and it was all a bit daft. I remember one day Hugh Miller actually lost both his cameras because they were tied together. And he lost the whole lot over the side, so that screwed up his comp. And I did comps for a couple of years, but I just decided that the technology then wasn't really up to it. We had one comp in Morzine, and we were having to go around the back. One of the turn points was the hotel on the top of the Avoriaz cliff. I don't know if you know Avoriaz near Morzine. there's a big cliff there and a bunch of hotels perched on the top. And somebody you had to have very visible turn points that people could identify whether you were in sector or not. But we were going round the back of this hotel in a terrible howling gale, and photographing the back and proving that from the room number that you could see that you were actually in sector. And I was just thinking, this is stupid. That you're taking your hands off your brakes, you're having terrible collapses as you're doing it, and it was too frightening for words. And I had a bit of an episode because I just got a new comp wing that had a gradient AVAX back in those days, and we didn't know anything about trimming of gliders. When I first got it, it was fantastic, but after probably 100 hours of flying it, it was going seriously out of trim, and I just thought it was possibly me or something. But it would spin at the drop of a hat. And in the same comp in Morzine, I had a bit of a deal. It collapsed in front of me. It started spinning, and then I managed to stop that, and then it dived behind me and carried on spinning. And so I'm getting wrapped up, but the brattle of the risers is getting closer and closer. My head's being forced down to my knees, and just at the last minute, I managed to pull both risers over my head. But by doing so, I pulled my helmet off.
Jesus.
And so I'm dropping through. So then I managed to correct it and got it flying again. But I'd been whipping past this cliff at the time, which was a bit scary. And the helmet actually landed on a chalet down below and broke some tiles in some chalet owner's roof. So he turned up a bit later and he was pretty furious. But at the same time, I got ordered out of the air by Innes Powell, who was our safety officer. Because in those days you weren't allowed to fly without a helmet, but that was all pretty scary.
Oh, that seems quite rude.
Yeah, very, very rude. Yeah, and this is the same Innes Powell safety officer who do you know Bob?
Yeah,
Gordon, yeah. Well, he was Innes famously came tumbling through a start gaggle, and Bob came over on the radio and said, "Mind out, everybody! The safety officer is coming through." So we all had to part ways and let him come through and recover.
And down through your tumbling incident and ripping off your helmet, did you manage to take the photo?
I did get the photo.
Oh my God.
But then I was ordered out of the sky to go and land, and there were people. But back in those days, gliders were not like they are now. There were people flailing around all over the place, and they were very big floppy things that would drop out of the sky. They're not the machines in any shape or form that we're flying today.
Yeah, sure.
But I just sort of decided about that stage that I'd had enough of going around taking photographs, and I didn't think racing. I liked the racing side of it, but I didn't like the lack of technology and the having to wait until 3 a.m. to find out that you weren't in sector. And we used to do pin. You'd actually have to mark in a map where you got to with a pin. It wasn't very techy. And there was forever pin creep going on with people saying, "Oh, well, if Bob got there, I got 2 fields further than Bob
Right.
did." And that was about as scientific as we got to finding out who was the winner of a comp. And it was all a bit of a joke, but it was great fun. But not really measurable.
Things have come a long ways. It makes me realize how much I missed out on. Those of you listening, if you want some more really hysterical stories about taking pictures, you've got to listen to the episode with Nate Scales. He was he had perfected things like dropping your camera and dropping the batteries out of the camera, and It's pretty
Yeah, I
funny.
mean those days.
Good thing that's over. I can't imagine, especially in a place like this. I mean, God, taking your hands off your brakes is a full-on thing to do anyway, let alone take a picture. What happened then between those kind of early days and, let's say, Sun Valley? Did you?
Well, I after so I did a few years of comp flying, and then I got into a bit more of the not well a bit of vol bivouac, but more vol visa.
Ah,
So we would disappear off and fly from. I'd get a flight to Nice. I'd meet up with Ulrich Jessup, and we would fly from there up to Geneva over a couple of days. And really enjoyed doing that. And I did quite a bit of flying with two other Englishmen, Simon Hedford and Tim Guilford, and we would head off on silly treks through the Pyrenees and decide it was all dangerously unflyable. But we did it. So some of the things that you do, but in a very much a tamer version, and with the odd stop at a decent restaurant as well, which I quite enjoyed. And then because my wine business, I had to go on trips to places, rather lovely places like in Argentina a lot. We were importing quite a lot of Argentinian wine back then, and so I'd bunk off and take my glider with me and fly quite a lot up and down the Atlas. Sorry, not the Atlas. The mountains of around Mendoza and south of that.
I don't know that. Yeah, I don't know
Bariloche.
that area well at all. It looks like a really fun place to have adventures.
Yeah. I mean, it's pretty epic stuff. It's very very windy, and a few times if you land out, it can be just ridiculous. I landed. I had quite a windy trek in, and you get a lot of wave forming there, which can be quite scary on paragliders, especially. Well, maybe less now, but back in the day they were. It was a bit more treacherous. But you could land out only a few hundred yards from a road, and it would take you 3 or 4 hours to push your way through the cactus plants. You have to use your glider as a battering ram, and just
Ugh,
So that wasn't much
no.
fun.
Ouch. That's some
But
proper kind of adventure flying. Is that still? Where is your heart in paragliding? Is it more with the comps, or is it more that kind of thing?
well, I've got back into comp since I loved doing that, and I love the places it takes you, and the silly experiences you get. Having to. I used to take a fishing rod as well, and I quite like doing a bit of foraging. So trying to survive off what you can take with you as well. I quite enjoyed that. But yeah, I've really got back into comp flying probably 7 years ago. I sort of decided to have another go at it, and the gliders are so different now, that it's opened it up for me. And I the year of Sun Valley was the first year I got back into. I got up to a level where I had a letter to get into the World Cups, and Sun Valley was actually my second World Cup. But I'd sort of given myself that year a target that if I could possibly get a place to get into the Superfinal, maybe that would do it for me for that year. But since then, I've really enjoyed everything about it, and the people are such fun, and I totally agree with what Nate was saying, that 1 year of World Cups, or just one World Cup, is probably the same as doing as a learning experience. Compared is about the same as a whole year of flying cross country. So yeah, it's a real eye opener what you can do on a paraglider.
And then you were before we started the show, you were telling me you guys have been doing some pretty cool, I guess you'd call it adventure flying, but more kind of 1 day stuff in from your home. You're in Britain. Tell me about some of that.
We've got a fantastic Hugh Miller, the
Sure.
editor of Cross Country. He's set up Hugh and Jim
Yeah,
Mallinson.
I
I
know
don't know if
know
you know
Jim
the
very
dreaded
well. Yeah,
Jim.
my first ever bivvy was with John in beer back in 2000. Was that 9 or 11? It was very early on, and we did a little flight from beer back to top landed above Manali and spent the night in the ice, and then flew back the next day. And
Oh,
yeah, he
great.
kind of introduced this whole bivvy thing to me a few years back. But those guys are great.
Well, Jim, and Jockey uh, decided to set up a North versus the South of Britain competition. And it's so for just one weekend a year, we all get together in a location, normally the middle of England. And the principle is that we will travel because in England the weather's so shit most of the time. You've got there, but there is somewhere in the UK that's going to be good. So we decided to have a mobile competition. So it's the top, I think, 30 pilots from the north versus the top 30 in the south. And we all get together, have a bit of a party, and then head off in our cars to wherever's going to be good. So this year, we all met up in the Lake District at Jockey's Place, and then the after a big night out at Jockey's Centre, we all headed off in a coach that we found that morning, and headed up to Scotland to a mountain called Tinto. Well, a mountain, it's a biggish hill, but we don't really have mountains in the UK, not real ones, but a biggish hill. And then set a goal of 217k down into England, and I think out of a field of 60, probably a third made it. I think 15 or 20 people made it to this little field down near Barney
That
Woodhead's
is
house.
awesome. What a cool flight.
Yeah, and flying over the English countryside is an absolute treat. It's always sort of emerald green, and you can see both coasts from about 5,000 feet where we were, and this comp is becoming a really special weekend. I mean, we've had just ridiculous weekends for the last 4 years where we've flown probably sort of goals of 200k 3 times over a weekend. It's ridiculous.
Are you guys
And
calling that on the
it's just
weather? Is the weekend flexible, or did you just keep getting lucky with the weather?
it's it's totally mobile. So we started in Scotland. We all trekked down to the north of England. The next day was going to be good in the south, so we get in the car and we drive for 5 hours, and we all went from a really tiny hill, sort of like 100-meter top to bottom, and we flew from there down to Brighton, which is 150k
Wicked.
to where. Yeah, I mean it's just ridiculous. Russ came over from because he lives in France, and he'd never flown 100k in the UK ever, and in 2 days he flew 375k. It's just
Unbelievable. That's
outrageous.
awesome. It's kind of along the principle of the Nate's comp that's going on right now called the Intermountain Wide Open. He runs it for 2 weeks, and it's your four best scores on X contest, and people can fly anywhere. And it's kind of a bragging rights thing. If the best scores are from Sun Valley, then Sun
Yeah,
Valley
because
wins. But it's not really the
it's
person. It's more. It's basically a way to get everybody together in the same zone and go flying. Which, I mean, the other day we launched here a couple days ago, and there must have been 30 people on launch, and we haven't seen that since the World Cup. That just doesn't happen here. Usually
yeah.
there's maybe two of us. So that was pretty exciting. That sounds brilliant.
Oh well, Yeah, it's very tricky in the flying in the UK as well because you've got all sorts of airspace restrictions and things. So yeah, but it's all down to there's no prize or anything. It's all down to bragging rights, and it's just a good fun thing to get together with other British nutters who share your addiction to a silly sport.
Well, so you started kind of getting back into comp flying 6 or 7 years ago, and in the last couple years, I mean, really since Sun Valley. So that's what I want to ask about. Is just it seems like you have really upped your game, especially since that incident, which is in some ways kind of unexpected. But how have you? Before we talk about the incident, how have you approached just progression and training? Is there training involved, or because I believe you're defending the British title this year? Is that correct?
I did. Sadly I lost it, but I was very happy to hand on the cup to Alex Coltman, who flew his socks off and thoroughly deserved it. But yeah, I came third in our comp this year. But yeah, I was very happy to win it last year.
Yeah, and you are not surrounded by slouches in the air as well. That's a hell of an achievement.
No, we've got a very good level of pilot in the UK, and we've got an exciting new section.
Yeah, so we were asking about how you've kind of approached training and progression and improvement since you got back into comp flying.
Yeah, I think that comp flying is something you've got to spend time learning. It doesn't go in straight away. The little tricks here and there, and the general discipline that you need to really get to takes time, I think. And I don't think, however good you think you are, there's always so many other pilots who just know how to get through a landscape quicker than you do, that it takes a while before you understand the sort of flow that you need to adopt. So I don't think you can expect to get to the high level that quickly, and you've just got to sacrifice time with pilots that are spending time with pilots who are much better than you are until it starts to rub off on you. And I've learned so much from so many people, but probably, I mean, I've got a few people who I really admire in our game, and I try to match their style. And I think people like Russell Ogden is a complete legend, and the way he flies is it's hard to emulate because he's so good. But I like his style. I like Nick Grease's style as well. He's a great climber, which I think is the main skill that you need to achieve. If you can climb well with a in a good gaggle, then you can generally fiddle your way towards the front. That's one skill. I think gliding. I love the way Charles Cazot glides. He always can seemingly get from just from the bottom to the top on a long glide, just by being a bit more intelligent than everybody else. But I just think it takes time in our game, and you'll only get to a higher level if you can put in the hard yards and observe those around you who are really doing a good job.
How much are you flying every year?
I fly, I suppose, about 300 hours a year.
A lot.
And quite a lot. And that's I try to do as much as I can in competition, because I think that's really where you can measure how you're improving, or if you're improving or not. But it's such a hard game, though. Ours, there is an element of luck, and I used to think that I was always being a bit hard done by. But your luck improves the more practice you put in. Um,
It's funny how some people are more lucky than others, isn't it?
yeah,
Yeah.
but then you can have some. It's such a there is an element of lottery in this. Even we had this week Pepe Meleke, who is I think one of the best pilots. He won the competition in Gemona, the last World Cup in Gemona in Italy, and who had been flying brilliantly. He bombed this week 2Ks from the start gate. He did appeared to do nothing wrong, but the air swallowed him up. He was gliding off and doing nothing that he wouldn't normally do. That would end. Normally he'd end up right at the front and would win it, but this day he ended up landing, scratching his head and going, well, "How did that happen?" So that's the. I think it's the lovely thing about this sport is that you just never quite know where it's going to take you, and it can be on an amazing journey, and you can end up winning a task, or it can put you on your ass and you end up and you think that you don't even know where to start.
Right, scratching your head
Yeah,
out in the field, out in the middle of nowhere. What the hell just happened? And it
yeah,
happens to everybody, doesn't it?
yeah.
Is of the 300 hours, how much of that would you say is comp versus just free flying? Just approximately, percentage
I
wise.
would say about 50-50.
About
Yeah,
fifty-fifty.
I
Okay.
love. I mean, I just love flying. I'll
Yeah.
go flying on a crappy day in England quite happily. I love. Yeah, I've got a new tandem which I'm enjoying. Any form of being in the air, especially if you can get up and away from a hill is fun.
So 20, give or take 24 years of flying, is have there been times where you haven't had that passion or desire, or have there been times where you've gone off to other things, or has it been pretty consistently epic?
It's the one thing in my life that I'd say has been a consistent grip. I love doing everything. I like playing any game. I'll play. I love skiing. I go quite hard when I ski. I love fishing. I love playing tennis. I'll do anything. But the one thing I keep coming back to is flying. I can't get away from it. I'm the worst person to go driving with because got my head up looking at clouds all the way. My wife hates it. She says I'm either looking in a river or I'm looking up at the clouds. I'm very rarely looking where I'm going.
So of the 300 hours, you said about 50-50, you're comp flying and then you're free flying. When you're free flying, are you really actively working on things that will help are you thinking about, okay, like this is a skill I really need to work on, or is it more just going out to have a good time, and those skills, obviously they just add up and stack up anyway, regardless. Every time we're in the air, it's you're getting better. But are you quite active about your training to bring it across to comp
Well, I
flying?
think I'm always trying to improve my. I mean, it all comes back down to glider handling and how confident you are in various scenarios. When you've got to use your skills at all stages, and the sort of concentration is such an important part of it. I really virtually I can't stop myself now, but every time I'm in a thermal, ideally I'm with flying with other people, but I can't I'm competitive with anybody else, even if it's a bird. I find myself desperately trying to out thermal buzzards at home, not happy if I haven't out climbed them and shown them that that they're not seeing it properly. So it's a bit silly, but I think that you've got to have a competitive side to you, and to want to improve. So yeah, I don't let any flight go by without thinking about how it's if I can improve certain ways. I mean, the pitch control of my glide, my reading of clouds, cloud development, cloud decays, just the whole pattern of flow of the airflow through a landscape. I'm always trying to improve my knowledge, and it's never quite good enough. You always think that you're going to be better, but every flight there's something that you can learn that you didn't know before, and that's part of why I love it.
Okay, buddy. Well, this is a story I know you've written about and told probably too many times, but we have to talk about it. It was my first World Cup. Sounds like it was your second World Cup after coming back. Yeah. Tell me about what happened on the last day of the PWC in Sun Valley.
Well, we'd had Sun Valley is I still think probably one of the most amazing places I've ever flown anywhere. I've flown all over the world, but I still think Sun Valley is the biggest experience you can have. The air is so big. We'd had an amazing comp up until that point. We'd flown places in landscape that it's hard to describe it, but some of the flights, we'd had a long flight over when we went to King Mountain and beyond, and you're linking mountain ranges, and it's with insanely long glides between them, and the air is so huge you can't quite describe it. The countdown, you can see gliders ahead of you being ripped up in the sky like confetti, just being blasted up, and you have to just hold on to the seat of your pants and count. We were literally going 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4. Oh my god, boom! And but that flying was indescribable, and I'd loved it. I absolutely loved Sun Valley, but the last day was another 100k task, and I think we only had one turn point to go around, and it started out pretty nice, but by the halfway stage it had got progressively windier, and the climbs, I'd noticed that it was another standard sort of 5-meter climb, but I noticed that this one was normally in a 5-meter climb you're going up pretty quickly and pretty vertically at that rate, but I was tracking back in this one. I just said to myself, okay, this is really getting properly windy, and we were getting into a section where it was pretty mountainous as well, I think, and I'd started telling myself to be careful. And to be so I was flying on the safe side, and I'd been flying with another guy, Juan Becerra, who was on an ice peak as well, and he disappeared. The wind was coming in and flowing up the mountainsides, up a series of gullies, and Juan had decided we'd separated, and he'd gone into the lee side, and I said to myself, God, that guy's a complete nutter. He's really going to be asking for it going down that side of the system, straight into the rotor. Anyway, so I headed off down what I thought were going to be the better, from a windy point of view, the least turbulent area. And I thought I could still get up there from there, and would be possibly one more big climb and then into goal. But I headed down a valley system, and there was sort of a bit of a pimple. I got a little bit of a lift off this pimple, and I was thinking, well, I'm probably too low now. And I was only probably 40, 50 feet off the ground when I heard that awful puff noise, and I knew the wing had completely gone. But I was just at that awkward height where I was too low to throw the reserve, but still high enough to really hurt. And I just thought, well, this one is going to be a bit of a thump in. And sure enough, hit the ground a couple of seconds later, and a couple of bumps, rolled into some low scrub. The glider rolled up a bit as well, and I think just sat there for a while and took stock and thought, wow, I really have thumped in this time, but properly in the middle of nowhere. What did I do? I lay there for a while. I sort of managed to. I tried to push myself up, but realized only one of my arms was working, and so I pushed myself over to be face up, and my face was bleeding. I bought a nice new pair of specs that had gouged a big gash in my nose, so I was bleeding quite a lot. But I sort of checked myself over pretty quickly, realized there were no bones sticking out anywhere. And so I thought, well, so I was quite encouraged by that because I had hit the ground pretty hard. But I knew I'd either dislocated or broken my arm. And I knew my ribs were not in a good shape. And my pelvis felt a bit busted as well. So I just lay there and took stock of the situation and I reached for my radio, tried to call people on the radio, but then realized that the battery had gone flat. Got my mobile phone out, which had plenty of battery, but no signal. And then I realized I was properly stuffed. I was looking up in the sky, hoping that other gliders would come over, but it's such a big sky there. And I thought we were possibly a bit offline because of the wind. Apart from Juan, I hadn't seen anybody for the last half an hour. So I thought, oh God, actually, maybe because of the wind, maybe the task had been stopped, and I hadn't heard it over the radio. I didn't know. I think it was actually stopped, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. I don't know. We were trying to piece this together. We don't think it was stopped before you went in. It was stopped very, very late. We were actually just. I had a bit of a wild episode that day as well. And when I landed at goal with Russ and Nick and some other guys, I thought already a couple of vans had come through to get the pilots in front of them because I was so far off the back. I ended up taking a line totally directly. I didn't push out into the flats like everybody else did because my instrument was saying go that way, and this was my second comp, and I didn't know any better. Yeah. So, but they ended up calling it. I had the same thing. My radio wasn't working. And they ended up calling it right about when the first gaggle got to that tiny turn point at that kind of windy corner, which was about 20 miles from goal. So it was just about, give or take 5-10 minutes about when you went down, we think.
So anyway, I couldn't see anybody. I was looking up in the sky trying to see if there was anybody coming past, and I'd had this weird thing when I was looking. I'd been looking at clouds and looking across the valley, and I could see the valley and everything, and looking up at the mountains around. And then I looked again, and I couldn't see the clouds, which was odd, and I couldn't see the other side of the valley, and I was looking at bushes and trees maybe 200 yards away, and then all of a sudden I couldn't see those, and I watched my focal point come towards me in the grass, actually moving towards me until to a point where I could only focus on the twigs in the bush above my head, and it was all a bit shocking. Everything else was a blur beyond it. And I had this.
So it was shock.
I had this voice. It wasn't my voice, but I had a voice. It sounded a bit like my dad, who knows everything about everything. But this voice said, "Well, Guy, this is obvious. It's a clear sign that you're going into shock. What you need now is some oxygen." And I said out loud, I said, "Oh, I've got some oxygen because we carry oxygen." And I reached around into the back of my harness, grabbed my cylinder of oxygen because we had it for Sun Valley flying, and pulled the nozzle off, turned it on full blast, and just snorted this gulped in air, lungfuls of pure oxygen, and watched the whole thing reboot. It was amazing.
Whoa.
The whole system went right out and just worked out. Boof, and then the clouds appeared. The other side of the valley worked. Okay, yeah. So that made me feel a lot better, and I didn't lose any consciousness or anything, which was important. And people have told me since that is a classic sign of shock. So I was lucky I didn't succumb to that. But then I lay there. So I lay there in the harness, made myself sort of comfortable. I couldn't really. I thought about putting the glider out a bit. My glider was half out, and it was still a howling gale coming up the valley, so it would sort of grip the wind a bit. But I was pretty well pinned in with these bushes, so I wasn't going anywhere. I wasn't being dragged or anything. And I thought about getting my reserve and putting that out, so if anybody came past, they could see it a bit more easily. But I just didn't have the strength to do it. I could just about get on my all fours sometimes, and then it was too much pain. So I just sat there in the harness and thought, well, maybe there'll be somebody coming along who'll see me and come and rescue me in a minute. But and then it got sort of started getting dark, and I thought, well, probably unlikely that I'm going to be rescued tonight. So I just made myself as comfortable as I could. I was perfectly warm because I had all my all the weather, warm clothes because we fly so high there. And I thought, well, this isn't going to be too bad. And then I heard this just rumbling noise. And I went, what the fuck? And I looked up because I couldn't really look. I had to sort of strain over backwards. And I could see up on the hillside, it was this sort of grassy sagebrush valley side that I was on. And I was probably about 2/3 of the way up the side of the valley. And probably 200 meters above me was this bloody great bear sitting looking at me, and it would sniff. It could sniff and it would look, and I could see its eyes, and it could see me, I could see it, and I knew it was interested, and it wasn't scared at all. It was just looking at me. And then every now and then the glider would fluff up and he'd back off a few steps, and then, but he was definitely intent on seeing what I was. So, and then it got darker and darker, and I couldn't see him again. So, but he'd been sitting there for probably 10 or 15 minutes as it got darker, and then I couldn't see. But I just
perfect.
Yeah. So I thought, oh, this is good. And at that
so you
point,
you probably slept like a baby.
Well, at that point, I just thought, you know what? I'm edible, and I'm covered in blood because of my nose. There's blood all over my face and stuff. And I thought, oh God, this isn't very good. So I thought, well, what do bears not like? And I thought, well, they don't like Americans with guns hunting them. So I thought, well, if I can make it look like I'm a little hunting party out. So I got my mobile phone that still had a bit of battery. So I took flash pictures, and I thought I'll sing American campfire songs. So I sang, "She'll be coming round the mountain when she comes, yee-haw," as loudly as I could. Took pictures with my mobile phone, and I got my penknife out, a little silly penknife with about a 2-inch blade on it, and I had one cheese sandwich that I didn't eat, and I've had it ready for the bear. I just thought, well, this might be the only thing that puts him off eating me, is if I feed him a cheese sandwich first. So I did my best. And anyway, I didn't see him again. I heard him later that night in the trees below. There was sort of a couple of sort of saplings and things. I think I heard what sounded like the bear just sort of crashing about a bit down there. But I didn't see him again. But it was that wasn't a very restful night.
No, that wouldn't have been a restful night.
Yeah. So anyway, I woke up in the morning about well, I still didn't really sleep, but I was pretty conscious at about 8 o'clock, and I sort of decided that I was probably not going to be found. I don't know why I thought that. I knew Mike and Nate. Nate had always said, if you get lost, head
Walk
downhill, and
down. Yeah.
eventually you'll get to somewhere. As long as you just head downhill, get to that will lead to a road eventually. So I had that in my mind, and I had Mike Fow, the meet director. Remember when he gave a lecture, because the I think the South Americans were a bit worried about how wild the countryside was that we were flying over, and he'd said, "Don't worry, we won't. If you do get lost, we won't leave you out there on the hill." So I had that. That really kept me going. Mike's words, I kept on repeating it. They're not going to leave me out here, but I just thought it would be so hard. I hadn't seen any sign. There was no sign of human life at all, and I was quite high up where I crashed. So, and that night, the first night, I hadn't seen a single light on the horizon. There was nothing out there. So I realized how remote my chances were of being found. And I just thought, well, if I can just, it looked like at the bottom of the valley there was a stream, and I had about 3 liters of water with me as ballast. But I thought that's going to run out soon. If I can just get to the stream, I'm going to be. I can last. I can eke out an existence for days and days and days. I just need water, and I'll be fine. So I decided that if 10 o'clock that morning, if no sign of anybody, I was going to go, which was probably the wrong decision. But in my state, I just thought I needed water. So I left everything that was heavy. I didn't have any of my warm clothes. I'd left my jacket stupidly, and I just worked out that if I pulled with my legs felt good. If I pulled with my legs, ignored the pain of my pelvis, and pushed with my good arm, and then I could actually snake away through the bits, the tufts of grass and the bit of sagebrush, and I could actually get going down the hill, because it was quite a steep hill down and it probably took me about 3 hours, but I made it down to the bottom of the valley, only to find that this lovely stream bed was dry as a bone. Absolutely, it had been a stream once, but it was completely bone dry.
August, there's no water.
Yeah, no water at all. So at that point, it was flat, and I couldn't carry on doing my my pulling and pushing, and I just had to find some way of standing up if I was going to carry on any further. I thought, well, maybe a bit further down there'll be the odd pool. Maybe there's some form of water that I can find from somewhere, or a bit of damp earth that I can dig and find a spring or something. So I just reached out my hand, and there miraculously was this big, strong stick that was about 5 foot long. I snapped the end off, and it had a nice little spike that I could put my ballast bag on. That's the only thing I took with me. And I'd left the cheese sandwich up with with all my kit.
Decoy for the bears.
Yeah, exactly. And so off I went, and so I got this stick, and I worked out if I levered, used my good arm and levered myself forward, I could get into a state where, with a good old push from the legs and a heave on the stick, I could maybe get up onto my feet. And I thought, if I could just be upright, my pelvis. I knew my pelvis was not good, because I could feel the bones not quite right. It was definitely broken, but I thought it wasn't sticking out. It wasn't like I'd broken the whole something off the ball joint off the top of my legs or something. It was basically there and intact.
What level of pain were you in at that point?
Yeah, it wasn't good.
Yeah,
I mean,
okay.
It's more pain than I've had before, but I think that you've got so much adrenaline going around your system that you can sort of park the pain, and I knew pain is only created by your brain. So if you can concentrate hard enough, you
Kind of ignore it.
sort of ignore it. Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, it's hard, but when you've got no alternative, and you've got to find a way of saving your skin, you can put up with an awful lot. So it took me a couple of hours probably, and I did pitch myself off a couple of times, which wasn't good. But eventually I managed to get all the leverage right and everything working, and got up onto my feet. And then I could, if I just swung a leg, 6 inches, plant the pole again, swing the other leg, then move the pole, swing leg by leg, and then I was sort of moving. And that sense of being upright and going somewhere, and every 10 meters I sort of stop and look back and go, oh yeah, that's I'm getting out of here somehow. So I think I got about a kilometer that day. A few times, you sort of stop. I leant up against a tree for a while, and you sort of contemplated my sad state that I was in. But then, you just have to move on. And but later that day, I saw all of these this overdevelopment going on. I couldn't believe it, but the clouds were just getting bigger and bigger, and then boof, the tops were coming through, and they were going Q-Nimi, and I thought, oh God, yeah. And sure enough, at about 8 o'clock that night, this huge thunderstorm blew up, and it just dumped rain from 8 till about, I don't know, 2 in the morning. Huge electric storm. I'm sure you would have seen it. And I lay down in this ditch and just got drenched. I had my grey woolly pulley on, and luckily I had some merino undies, and I think they would probably save my life. But I got properly hypothermic that night. It was freezing cold, and my legs were. I had a weird thing with my different body parts all having a conversation. So I was lying there, freezing, shivering, and just breathing into my jumper. Had my busted shoulder and arm was like a Canadian. We sell quite a lot of wine in Canada, so I know the Canadian accent, and it was as Canadian. And he was sort of on my side saying, don't worry, it looks bad, but it's not really not that bad. And I had my legs were two English, sort of posh English twits who were saying, well, we don't care what he says. We're not going to do any more walking at all. We've had it.
This is like
shit.
the Animal House. You've got the angel on one shoulder and the devil on the other.
Yeah, literally. And he was this guy going, "Don't you worry about those boys, guy. They're going to do what they're told, and I'll sort them out. You just carry on, doing what you're doing. That's good. That'll keep you warm. And this pullover is a lot better than you think it is." So I had this really weird thing, and then eventually I think I nodded off, and I had this odd dream that I was in a trade show selling camping equipment, and I was lying there in the ditch, and people would be coming past, and they were saying, "So what are you selling there?" And and I was saying, "I'm just not selling anything. I've got a very warm pullover, but I tell you, it's freezing cold and I'm wet. And if I were you, I'd buy any other tent in this anything other than the grey woolly that I'm wearing." And anyways, I think I was sort of hallucinating a bit and going off on one. But and
that was a wicked storm that night, man. We were all freaked out. We just thought, holy shit, things just got a lot worse for him.
It was. I mean, I don't know if you often have storms like that, but it was. The lightning was sensational, and I just watched this storm. I think that actually that was the other thing that probably saved me, because there was so much thunder and noise, and it was pretty terrifying to if you were an animal. And I reckon all the bears and cougars were holed up, not wanting to be out hunting, eating anything that night. So I think I was very lucky because of that. But anyway, in the morning, I sort of woke up. I was freezing cold, but luckily the sun, as soon as it came out, it was you got such a lovely hot sun there. It warmed me up pretty quickly. So that fixed the hypothermia, and but I took another couple of hours to get to my feet, and because all my clothes were soaking wet. It was a lot heavier and everything. But so that was a really brutal morning, but I got going and I got round the corner in the valley bottom, and I could see this little wooden shack, this beautiful, little wooden hut with two windows in it, a door in the middle, and it was underneath a lovely willow tree that was by the stream, and now the stream has some water in it by now because of the storm. And I was just cursing my luck, thinking, "You idiot! If you'd just gone another 200 yards the night before, you could have slept in there." And I was thinking that, but I bet you there's some guy who's got baked beans and he's probably got some food, and he might, who knows, he might have a radio. And anyway, so I'm walking up to this hut, and I'm thinking that there's definitely inhabited because there's glass in the window. Getting closer and closer and closer. I'm probably 50 meters away, getting really excited. And I look up again, no shack, nothing.
Whoa.
And I go, what? How did that happen?
Wow.
Because I could see, I was like counting the tiles on the roof. I mean, it was just
very vivid.
It was just totally, I could draw it for you today, and the tree was still there. This lovely willow tree was there, and it was the perfect place for a shack. But it just had gone, and
excellent.
It's just your mind, just
trying to keep you going. Trying to keep you going
while you're in pain, and just keeping you going a few hundred yards. But that was pretty weird. But then I carried on, and it got a bit hot, and then you start playing games just to pass the time. I'd noticed that there were a whole crew of fly that it had this big scabby gash on my nose, as I said, and the flies were getting into it, and I noticed most of them were sort of blue bottles, but then there was one green one who was a bit quicker than the others, who every time I'd sort of brush them away and they'd all get back, but it was always the green one who'd get back on there quickest. And so I started sort of playing like musical chairs with the flies. I go up my nose and they'd all fly up, and I'd sing them a song and see who would be back on there last. Anyway, I did that for a couple of hours. That seemed to amuse me.
I have to jump in and give the listeners a little bit of perspective on where you were. I mean, this is literally our backyard, and it seems like when of course we knew you were missing that first night, and by the next morning had mounted the whole town to go search, and we had ATVs and motorcycles and helicopters and the Blackhawks. I think we had 2 of those operating, and I mean, it was this major mission. And you think with that kind of personnel going on, we were all just super confident that we would find you in no time. But the problem is we had no idea where. We assumed you were on course line because we had to. But because we didn't have a tracker on you, we didn't know where on course line, and it's 100 kilometers, which is 60 miles, but the course line's pretty defined.
You could be 20K off the course line,
and then suddenly it just becomes when we met down at the police station and they mapped it all out. You still don't get an idea until you go out there. I mean, and this is country that I've said at the time that was the first time I'd flown through there, but now I've flown over it a lot. And it terrifies me every single time I fly over that, because you realize that it is no man's land. I mean, it's just,
Yeah,
you leave this
it's
town and literally, if you go 15 kilometers kind of southwest, which is what we did that day, we call that no man's land. And it's
mm,
just, when we started hiking on those hills looking for you, and where they put me wasn't even close to you. But you start dispersing up these hills, and you've got all these people, and even with all of that, they set it up really. It was very organized, and you always have to be able to see the next person in the line, and don't make sure you don't go over the same place again. And they really taught us how to search. And you go out there, and by the end of that first day, I just started thinking, "There's no way in hell we're going to find Guy." I just thought
yeah,
this is a needle in a haystack, and it was just so interesting how it changed from everybody in the morning just being so excited. Okay, we're going to find him. It's not going to be a problem. And then by that night, and then the storm. By that night, it was just like there's no fucking way we're ever going to find him. He if he doesn't walk out of there, or it's going to be a miracle. Basically, we've had a couple, no, not a couple. We had one incident just a couple days ago that reminded me of how
mm,
incredibly hard it is to find somebody, and especially in that kind of terrain. It's just it's really tough. But anyway, carry on.
yeah. It wasn't good. But I hadn't seen any. I knew everybody would have been looking, I'd seen the odd plane go over, but I just thought that's such a long way away. And if you can't see somebody on the ground in a light aircraft, how are they ever going to see me? I knew that my glider was pretty well rolled up, and my glider happens to be, it was a nice ice peak with sort of
Yeah,
grey
the
blue one, which
cloud,
is pretty much the
the
same color
cloud,
as the sagebrush that we
right?
were in. So I knew it was going to be impossible, and I hadn't put it out very cleverly, or at all. It was just a little, probably one corner of it, a third of the wing was out and fluffing around in the breeze, but it was pretty well camouflaged. So I just thought, there's no way anybody's going to find me unless I walk out myself. So I'm doing my best job. And then probably it was 12 o'clock, I think, on the third day. I heard for the first time a helicopter. I heard a definite helicopter, engine sort of sound. I looked around, couldn't see anything, and then probably about 10 minutes later, I heard it again, and it came into my valley. And I saw it fly in, but there was sort of a bit of a curve in the valley, and then it seemed to fly straight through at the head of the valley, and then out, and I just didn't hear it again, and it looked like it had gone. So I just thought, well, that's as close as you'll come, and that's it. That they've tracked through. They haven't seen the glider, and they've actually gone and missed it. So I actually put a little bit of video on my phone. I was keeping a little bit of a phone log because I had some battery left, and I just said how disappointing that was. Incredibly disappointing after to be so close and not to be found. But I resolved that my fate was going to be to walk out, so I carried on going. But actually, the Black Hawk had one Russell Ogden in it, who is not noted for his eyesight. He can generally not see further than his glider when he's flying, but he was in the helicopter, and I don't quite know why they'd chosen Russ to be in the helicopter, but he was there, and he'd seen out of the corner of his eye my
Yeah.
glider, and it was a sweep. He'd been in the helicopter all day, and I think the previous day as well. And it was the furthest sweep to the south that they were doing. And just as they were leaving that valley, he saw it, and he told the guy to go around, and the pilot to go around and land. And that's why I hadn't heard the engine, because they had actually landed and shut the engines off pretty quickly. And Russ had leapt out of the Black Hawk. He said he ran towards the wreckage of my glider and my harness, saw the blood on the harness itself, and thought, "Oh God, he's definitely been eaten." So they're looking around in the bushes for uh, body parts or anything, calling out, yelling out. And then the other guy, I don't know who the other guy was who was with him, but the other guy saw, I think, the track, my track going down the valley, and so they followed the trail down to the bottom of the valley, and then they found a footprint, and that's the point where they went, oh, actually, this is a bit interesting. So they came running down, like the Lone Ranger and King Masobi, tracking my trail, and found more and more footprints. And radioed the helicopter to meet them further down the track. The helicopter took off, flew down the track, flew down the valley to pick them up. Came all the way down. I heard the helicopter, and then saw it flying probably 150 meters above the ground. Came right over my head, and I'm there with my stick with a red T-shirt on the end of the stick, and I'm waving it at the helicopter, going, "Yay! I've been saved. That's fantastic!" And the helicopter turned around, flew back up the valley, went round the corner, gone again. And I'm thinking,
Are you kidding me?
Fuck! No way! And they really hadn't seen me again. I mean, that just goes to show how lucky I was to be found, because I was right underneath them by this time on a like a cow track, and they still hadn't seen me. There were four people in the helicopter. Not one of them saw me. So anyway, they flew around the corner, landed again, picked up Russ, and then about probably 40 minutes later, it seemed like eternity, but they came down the valley, this time at about 150 feet. At about 50 feet, and nearly knocked me over with the wash, because it's such a massive helicopter, and then landed, and I struggled over, and the door of the helicopter goes back, and it's a beaming Russell Ogden.
Wow.
There. I said, what took you so long? But it was a pretty emotional moment.
I bet.
Yeah, for me certainly, and I know Russ was.
It was so awesome seeing his face that night. He was lit up like a Christmas tree. I mean, and really, to take you through the opposite side of it, you start, everybody's so excited it's going to happen, and then inevitably, time stretches on, and you start hearing all these grim things like, oh, if you don't find somebody in the first 24 hours, it means X, and then, then there was the storm, and then there was the next day, and I mean, really, we were really starting to think we were looking for a body, and it's just, you start to get really down, and the adrenaline is gone, and the search seems hopeless, and I mean, when we got that call that next day that you'd been found, and you'd walked a half a mile or something, and I mean, we were just like, wow! It was special. It was special for the whole town. I mean, really, the town was, this little town's small, and the town was pretty involved and excited, and yeah, that was a special day.
Yeah, there's some. I mean, it was the backstories. I think. I mean, my trudging along the valley is my crash story is one story, but the other stories I think are almost more interesting. When I was in hospital, I had a visit from the guy. Is it Bob Wolf, who is one of the retrieve drivers we had, and I got to know him. On the long task we had, the 190 odd K one, where nobody made it, but so a busload of us got pretty close to the goal, and I'd been sitting in the front seat.
It must have been bus. Rob Wolf. Yeah, he was our support driver on the Rockies Traverse. Yeah.
Rob Wolf. Yeah, what am I saying, Rob? And I got chatting with him, and he's a nice, very nice, normal fella, and we'd been swapping good stories and telling jokes and things, and we stopped for dinner, and I'd had dinner with him. Anyway, he had heard about the accident and the crash, and he was looking up on the internet, and with his wife at home, and he said that they got all of the maps out, and he was saying that's a real shame, because that English guy, we got on really well, and it's a shame he's gone missing. So they were having a look, and he was telling his wife, saying, I haven't got a clue where he could be. They had all these maps out on the kitchen table, and he could be anywhere in this. With the wind the way it was, he could be all over the place here. And she said to him, well, that's interesting, but what are you pointing at? And he said, what do you mean pointing at? She said, all this time you've been saying how impossible it is to find him. Your finger has been stuck on the map. And he said, well, I'm not pointing at anything. And she got a pencil and she put a cross on the map where his finger was. And he said, well, he could be there. It's a bit weird, but yeah, it's just sort of, with the way the wind could be. But anyway, he could be anywhere. And he said they went to bed. He didn't really get to sleep at all. And he said he got up about 3 o'clock in the morning and decided, well, I'm gonna, because it was really niggling him. He said, I'm going to go and join in the rescue. So he went into because the rescue got moved to the sheriff's office, I think. So he said he went into the sheriff's office and said, look, if it's okay with you, this might sound a bit weird, but I want to go and look where this cross is on the map. So the sheriff put on the official record, okay, Rob is looking in this spot. He drove his truck to as near as he could get to it. I think on the other side of the there was a sort of a bit of higher ground, and he hiked up. And it took him hours and hours and hours to hike up. And he got up at about 12 o'clock. He came over this top of this col, and he was looking down to the point where he'd marked this cross on the map. And when he saw the helicopter come in from the other side,
What?
And and he said, look, he came in to see me in the hospital, and he said, look, I'm a redneck sort of guy, and I don't believe in this sort of shit, but I just wanted to tell you face to face that this is what happened. And he said, I was looking down, I got my binoculars out of my backpack, and I could see the helicopter land. He described how Russ leapt out of the helicopter and tumbled down the hill. And Russ told me about this as well, so I don't think he could have. He didn't make that bit up. So it was all pretty credible. But he said, I looked and I could see them tracking down the hill. I could see them running along the bottom of the valley, and then I looked further down the valley, and there I could see you walking along with your stick. So I watched. He said he watched the whole rescue play out over the course of an hour and a half.
Cool.
And I packed up his bag. He said he was in a pretty emotional state, because he was like the rest of you. He thought that there was no chance in that scenery you could ever get found. So he said that's one pretty weird story.
Wow.
And then the other one was Zach Hargreaves, who'd done an amazing job talking to my family at home. That's a pretty horrible job for anybody to have to be he was the liaison man, and he'd got to know the girls pretty well over I've got two daughters and my wife, and my eldest daughter Chloe was the main point of contact with Zach, and he'd kept them going over all this time, and he'd said to them that his background, he was in charge of the search and rescue, I think, and his background was in the military, and he'd never not found somebody he'd been looking for, which gave them a lot of hope. But he hadn't actually told them that a lot of the people he'd been looking for were already dead. So, but anyway, at the end of this, he was like a real hero when the word got back home and that I'd been found. He, as far as my girls are concerned, was one of the greatest men on the planet. And so I wrote him a letter afterwards and sent him this letter just with pictures of his new fans. And he said he'd been away. He's a long distance truck driver, and he'd been away in his truck driving, and he hadn't been home, I think, but he came across this handwritten letter in amongst a pile of bills, and he went through, opened up the letter, saw the picture, and he'd heard in the meantime that my recovery, I'd recovered from the accident, and that I'd had some crazy idea of going off to the Superfinal in Colombia. So he said he looked at the date, the calendar, and he went, "Oh shit, the Superfinal is. It looks like it's in 3 days' time." So he said he bought himself a ticket, an airline ticket that moment. Got on a plane, pretty much the same day, came out to Colombia, and because he thought that he'd better keep an eye on me.
Wicked.
And I was in the bar in Roldanillo when I get this tap on the shoulder, and it's Zach. I couldn't believe it.
Amazing.
Who was there just to keep an eye on you, buddy. And that night, we were all sitting out in the square having drinks and having the final time that you do in Roldanillo, which is a great place. And Zach saw this rather good-looking Colombian lady across their square, and their eyes met. And anyway, he's only ended up
the
getting
rest is
married
history, as they say, right? Yeah, that is
it's unbelievable. Yeah, so I think that those stories are possibly more interesting than the crash.
Well, two things we've got to talk about before we sign off. I'm so glad you shared that story. The first is, other than having a tracker, which of course back then in those days we weren't very religious about doing, and of course we are now. But what are the takeaways from the accident? And then, and this may not be even correct, but it seems to me, and this was one thing Nate wanted to ask you about. It seems to me like your flying has kind of gone through the roof since Sun Valley. Like you've really stepped up your game. It's one thing to go for. It's just take me through that a little bit, because that was a pretty serious accident, and you're at the Superfinal 3 months later, and then since then you've got the British Championship last year, and you have had some really remarkable results. Tell me just about coming back from that, because I think often in paragliding, this is way more of a mental game than a physical game. Was that hard? Was it obvious? Was it, what was it?
Well, I've had the fear in the past. We all can get the fear. I've had situations where I've lost the wing and had nasty cascades, which bizarrely were more frightening than the crash that I had. Cause there's nothing I could do about it. It happens all so quickly, and I was a bit surprised that I didn't feel any real flying trauma after the accident. I'd broken my arm pretty badly, and I'd had a surgery on my shoulder. All my ribs fixed pretty quickly. I had punctured a lung, that fixed quite quickly. All your bones will mend. I didn't know how I would take to flying again, but I was just concentrating on getting my body mended, and I knew that if I could fix that, I set myself this goal of getting into the Superfinal, and I was so surprised that where I crashed just gave me enough points to get into that that final, and I was buggered if I wasn't going to turf up there and see what a Superfinal was like. I just think that you only have one life, and if you can't. What I suppose the crash, if anything, that's told me not to do things. So I now, if I get an opportunity, if I'm asked to go to something and I'm a bit tired, I'll still go. Whereas in the past I might have declined an invitation. I never say no to anything now, because I suppose that I'm more determined to do what I want to do.
Tell me about flying style. Have you Have you changed anything because of the accident? Do you fly more conservatively? Do you fly more risky? Do you?
No, I've always been quite conservative, and it's always a bit of a battle to let go. I'm too too controlled, I think, and that's I always my big problem at the moment is the end game. I can roll along quite happily in the for most of the task, and because my climbing is quite good, I can keep at the sort of the upper end of the thermal at the front, but I'm terrible at deciding when to go. And that's the big area I've got to fix in my flying. I'm always way too, I watch the likes of Pepe and Yasin especially, just go and go and go low, super low, and win tasks from impossible positions. And that's something I've got to work out of my system. But no, I just the whole super final, I think, has getting over the accident and getting into that super final. And in that first task, I'd fluffed the glider up literally once on a cold November day. So I crashed on the 25th of August. I got better enough to get the glider out. My shoulder was still a bit shit, but I fluffed the glider up and took a little hop off the hill in November. And then the weather was terrible in England until the super final itself in January. And I arrived there with no practice at all, and we had the first task day, and I fluked a sixth position on the first my first flight after the accident. I came sixth on the first task,
And you're fixed,
and
and you're repaired.
I just thought, yeah, that's it. I'm fine. There was no trauma, no nothing, and I've come sixth in the
Unbelievable.
super final. And I thought, right, well, there's no way back from this. So I ended up coming in the mid-20s, I think. So and I thought this, and I love the bunch of people that you mix with in World Cups. They're all so different, and I love the different nations but real characters all sharing the same stupid addiction. And I just thought, well, I want to do more of this. And I think the more you do, the more you learn. And my flying style, I don't think we really radically change. You just improve here and there, and it's a small gain job. If you can climb 5% better, glide 5% better, avoid making stupid decisions that get you isolated, all of a sudden you see the game a bit more clearly. And I think what we've moving on from that, I've been keen to put back into the youth of the UK what we can, what knowledge I've gained, and I've managed to convince Russell also that Russell has been brilliant about sharing his knowledge. He's got way more knowledge than virtually anybody on the planet about how to race a paraglider. So I've really enjoyed the British Paragliding Racing Academy that's been set up by some other English guys, Russell, Barney Woodhead, and Malin Lobb. And Russell and I have been doing a boot camp. So listening to Russ instill his knowledge into young people about how to race a paraglider is such a privilege to hear, because it really helps me as well. I think we're all able to improve our flying, and listening to Russ, it's like hearing something
Yeah.
coming from on high. There's nothing that is wrong. He knows the whole game better.
We always talk about Bill Belcourt being our guy like that. That's around. He was here the last few days, and it's just like he opens his mouth and just flowers of knowledge come out that you go, God, I just need to capture these things somehow and not bend them or hurt them or destroy them. And Russ is the same way. I mean, I haven't had enough contact with Russ. He was here, of course, after the PWC in Sun Valley, and was the inspiration really for this show. I mean, he gave a talk one day, which I happened to just put on a camera, and it was unbelievable. Oh my God! I mean, I still have to go back to that, and I'm still using that all the time in defense of the things that I do. And he's just really. There are certain people who have really thought about what we do in a different way.
Yeah, Bill was really kind. He came to see me in the hospital as well in Boise, and he's such a sage, level-headed, experienced guy. And when my wife obviously had issues because I was adamant that I wasn't going to give up paragliding. And I told her straight off that this wasn't,
a bump in the road.
However horrific the accident was for me, and how horrible it was for her and my girls, I wasn't going to give it up. And it was a bit of a shock to her that I was saying that. But I just said I'm not prepared to live a diluted version of my life in future when such an important part of it was. Is paragliding, and Bill kindly was there and explained that you can't take that away from somebody. And I think it was really he who managed to convince her that it wasn't such a bad idea to let me carry on paragliding.
Guy, that is kind of a poetic and perfect place to leave it. I think I know you need to get to bed, dude. You got some crushing to do in the next few days, and I really have appreciated this time with you. I'm sure we're going to be spending some time together in the air in the future. But thank you for sharing that quite dicey
story.
When
are you next coming over? When you must come over and come and join in on
North South Cup. Actually, and and I've been talking to Barney quite a bit lately. He and I have become quite good friends, and I just need to make that happen. As you know, my focus has been kind of on the X Alps, and I'll be getting into the training here pretty shortly, the physical side of that for the next X Alps. But I think this next one will probably be my last. So after that, I'll be a little more freed up to tee off around the world and go do some football. Yeah, but that North-South Cup just sounds brilliant, and you guys are always just, there are still lots of stories about, Mark Watts pounding it in Chelan and taking off again. And I mean, the Brits are, we just love having you guys over here. So likewise, the invitation is always open. I hope you'll come join us again in Sun Valley. As you pointed out at the top of the show, this is a pretty special place.
I'd love to.
It gives and gives. So
yeah. I would definitely jump at the chance of coming back to Sun Valley, and I think everybody should experience your big air and your hospitality, because that was all of the genuine hospitality you get in the States. I think it's probably only matched in the Arab countries, probably. But the way you welcome strangers in is very humbling. And all the people there, the Nick Greases, the farmers, the Nates, Mike Fow, they were all so special people to meet. And I love you.
Oh, thank you. Well, we love you too, man. And that was a heroic effort on a lot of people's parts, and especially yours. And we're glad, of course, you got through it. And keep on crushing. And let's do this again, but in the sky next time. Thanks, Guy. I really appreciate it.
Okay. Thanks, mate. Cheers.
Seems we both gained somewhere.
I hope you enjoyed that. A lot of lessons there, a lot of little pieces of advice, some good things to be thinking about when it comes to safety in your kit and what we all need to be thinking about every time we launch off a mountain. I'd really love your feedback. I'd really love to hear what other guests you'd like to have on the show. Send me any questions that haven't been answered in one of the previous shows. If you're just discovering the podcast, I'm just reminded over and over again when I have these talks about some of the great things people have put out there in the past. I was fortunate enough to fly with Bill Belcourt this last week. He was part of that rescue I was talking about in the beginning. He was the very first show. Just some unbelievable advice there. If you want to learn how to glide, check out Matt Beechner's episode. If you want to laugh hysterically, check out Nate Scales. He's got some story about the X-Alps that I promise will make you cry with laughter. A lot of great shows there. Go back, check them out, enjoy them. As always, all we ask for is $1 a show. If you got some out of this one or one of the previous ones, you can find that donation link on the website, cloudbasemayhem.com. Thank you. It makes this all possible. Really enjoying doing it. We're going to keep doing it. And just finally, I want to put a shout out to my buddy Michael Lang, who sent me some acro toggles a few months back. I just put them on my cross-country wing, my Peak 4 recently, and I got to say that I think this is a really good move. I had a pretty major incident last year after I came back from the X-Alps. I got all spun up in my glider. I won't go into the full details here, but long and short of it was I couldn't get my hands out because I had big gloves on. It's quite cold here up high, and all spun up. Went to throw my reserve and couldn't get my hands out of my toggles, out of my brake toggles, and so that was pretty exciting. I ended up being able to sort it out. Didn't have to throw my reserve, so it all ended up okay. But good reminder to be thinking about things like that. But also these, using acro toggles. Number one, it allows you to just reach out and grab them. Doesn't have to have your hand stuck into something, but it also gives you just a lot more feel and a lot more input if you have acro toggles on your wing. So I just wanted to put out a shout to Michael. Appreciate those. If you want to get a pair, let me know. Just reach out to me via email or Facebook or whatever, and I can put you in touch with Michael. That's it for the show. Thanks a lot. Hope you enjoyed that. See you on the next one. Cheers.